question that's been plaguing the Genshin lore scene is the Abyss siblings' fate. Genshin's been out for nearly 4 years, but one of the biggest mysteries about them is why aren't they considered a descender? What did they do to get their quote-unquote alien lifeform status removed? Or did they have their motivations change? Did a god alter their destiny? Or did they choose to alter it themselves? And if so, why did they? Was it out of loyalty to the people of Khaenri'ah? Was it obligation? Or just to get stronger? But speaking of getting stronger, I've picked up something during my break that may or may not have eaten me alive. I like combat dodge style RPGs, so I started playing Combat Quest. It's a colorful fantasy roguelike with different dungeons, heroes, and gear that's completely customizable. It's free to both play and fully complete, and you don't have to pay to deck out your gear. You can just keep grinding the dungeons for materials and loot. You can also unlock new heroes, weapons, and armor. Okay, now that's out of the way, enjoy some of my gameplay. I actually got hooked on this game. You've probably already heard me talking about it on my streams, and I genuinely can't stop playing it since I really like roguelikes. You go into these dungeons, clear a room, and then level up your abilities. Also, if you're gonna play this, I really suggest that you take the diagonal shot. I don't know, just a friendly piece of advice. What I really like about it, especially since I'm still pretty new, is that it's actually super easy to pick up. You don't have to overthink any combos, you just need to dodge and pray that your mechanics will save you from everything. So go ahead and try it out for yourself. Be sure to download it from the link in the description and enter my promo code for 30,000 in-game currency. Anyway, thank you to Combat Quest for sponsoring this video. Classic. This video is just a theory and not indicative of the final product. Also, I'll be using Lumine as my Abyss sibling. So let's start with, what are descenders? The Fatui have a database of information describing something known as a descender. Nahida defines descenders as external beings that are not of this world. And because they are not from this world, there is no records about them in the Irminsul, and they are also unaffected by the foundational principles of Tevat. This is the case for the Traveler and 3 other descenders that are from the Fatui records. However, the Flower of Paradise Lost also alludes to them as being the invaders that descended beyond the firmament. The previous descenders had brought destruction to the land, but were also able to bring illusions that could break through shackles. The descenders were an anomaly, and because their motivations are unknown or unbound to this world, they remained outside of Tevat's foundational concept of fate. However, it was revealed in the Sumer Archon quests that the Abyss sibling is not considered by the Fatui as a descender due to unknown reasons. According to Nahida, the Irminsul has records of Lumine's journey up until a certain point, until someone tampered with her fate and obfuscated it. The key difference is that Aether isn't recorded in the Irminsul because he is not from this world, and because he is quote-unquote a descender. So, what happened? Well, that's something that we haven't gotten a concrete answer to. Now, the first thing that I want to consider was that Lumine, somehow, someway, was compromised during her travels. This line was also mentioned by Dainsleif, interestingly enough, in the Tevat Travail Guide. While the she is vague, this is most likely Lumine, considering that official material for Genshin's promotion uses Lumine as the Abyssal sibling. It would also make sense that Dainsleif still does feel connected to the Abyss sibling, considering their past together. This line would imply that Lumine is currently trapped in Tevat as her fate was obfuscated by something, and that Dainsleif's motivations, besides stopping the Abyss, is also to save her. From what or who, that's what we'll have to speculate about. So let's open the board. What could have possibly happened? Number 1, is it possible that they got connected to the Heimermine? The first consideration is, what if the Abyss sibling did exactly what Rena described in their notes about fate, that Lumine made an error by completing her journey and discovering the truth of this world, and in turn sold herself to the fate of this world. According to him, to excise the self is not to die, but rather to die before death. That way, there is no life to be ended. Thus may one achieve eternity. This step is vital, for by this may one avoid receiving a vision by some error. To receive a vision is to sell oneself to the fate of this world, to Heimermine, and to evermore lose a chance to walk the correct path. Is it possible then that after her journey, Lumine rejected a form of ascension, or whatever dying before death is to Renée? Did she fail to achieve that eternity by choosing to fight for the people of Khaenri'ah? I like to think that it'd be similar to an ascension-esque experience, where she once re-received her own power, but she was also finally noticed by the gods, and only then did she reject the ascension and choose to quote-unquote live for the people of Khaenri'ah. Now, what does it mean to be connected to the Heimermine? Well, I theorize that Lumine is now part of Tevat's astral star map. because Heimermene in Wikipedia is defined as the orderly succession of cause and effect, and the fate of the universe as a whole as opposed to the destinies of individual people. This also means that Lumine is playing by the same rules as the other citizens of Tevat, where she no longer remembers the Greater Lord and Scaramouche, but this could also mean that the gods are now mandating her fate. It is also mentioned before that divine judgment not only imposes a physical punishment on a person. If Lumine now plays by the rules of fate of this world, it means that she's just as trapped as everyone else. But connecting from that note, is it possible for the Traveler or Lumine to get a vision? Let's entertain the reverse. Could Lumine have become connected to the Heimermene through a vision? And is that actually possible? From the track record of vision wielders we have in Genshin, it's not impossible to have an inhuman have a vision. Created beings like Albedo and Wanderer were given visions. It also doesn't seem like overall faith in the gods connects you to having a vision, since we've seen characters that have strong ambitions but don't really care about the gods receiving visions. So is there a chance that Lumine was, against her will, given a vision by the gods? Maybe. The biggest evidence supporting against this, though, is according to the Traveler's character's story, the Traveler, for their part, can never receive a vision, for an alien life form does not belong. It also doesn't seem like Lumine has one on her person, or that she even needs one considering her origins. But if her fate has already been tempered that she is no longer free of the foundational principles of Tevat, and that includes avoiding the Heimermene, then she's a likely candidate for a vision. Not saying that she has one, but a likely candidate. What I also want to understand is the symbolic significance of having a vision. Honestly, a vision can be a pacifying tool to lock Lumine's fate in Tevat. According to Mona, astrologers believe that the patterns of the stars map out the destiny of vision bearers, past, present, and future. It's theorized that because the Traveler's a descender, either doesn't have a constellation or a stellar fortuna. The one in the lock screen is there for game purposes. But because Lumine's fate was altered, it's possible that she does instead. Number 3. Instead of going celestial, what if we go abyssal? Is it possible that their abyssal powers connected them to the fate of this world? In the Arc and Quest interlude, we find out that Lumine is also able to use abyssal power on top of her allegedly original power from the introduction scene. So what I want to theorize is what if her accepting the abyssal power and the power of the sinner actually allowed her to reweave her own fate into something much more. The Loom of Fate was a concept introduced in the Arc and Quest interlude KEJUDADAR that alluded to one's ability to reweave their own fate into something greater than the god's punishment. KEJUDADAR, with the power of the abyss, was able to unintentionally end the curse of immortality allegedly and become something beautiful. Is it possible that by attempting to control abyssal power and this loom, Lumine had accepted her fate and is now closely tied to the people of Conria? Now, that iteration to that theory assumes a more positive outlook on Lumine, but how about something more out of her control, like a corruption? At first I was considering that it was merely a byproduct of her want to save the Conrians, but what if it was a punishment by the gods? I want to focus on the fact that Aether and Lumine were separated by the unknown gods, but they weren't killed. This fact has been a mystery to me ever since the game began, because wouldn't it have been simpler to kill the Descenders if that was also something that Celestia did once? That was until I also considered that Aether only woke up when Lumine had finally completed her journey. It's also important to consider the alleged time difference. When Aether first woke up in Mondstadt, it was only recently that the Knights of Avonius and Venti heard of the existence of an Abyss Princess. Let's add a few more years into the mix because of the scene in the chasm and other parts in the story, and we have a relatively good estimation of about less than a decade to play with. The point is that I always questioned why were they woken up separately. Well, what if Lumine being sealed in after her journey was intentional by the gods? That when she fully reclaimed her power, she had already been so in tune with the world that they could trap her in. Pacify her, in a way, considering her origins. But I also want to consider that Lumine's reawakening was purposeful, and that she was sent by Celestia to fulfill something. And with that, we return to the Gnostic Chorus. The Gnostic Chorus gives us a great story about the first crowned heir beginning her journey of seeking a pearl in the Kingdom of Darkness, only to be deceived, and her original memory of her noble origins faded. Pronouns aside, considering that this is an allegory, I do like to theorize that this story alludes to the sibling very well. That they were once a creature of high caliber from another world that came to Tevat because of a purpose of seeking out an important artifact, but was manipulated along the way until she believed her fate was to save the people. Another good angle is by incorporating the sinner. What if she accepted her abyssal powers from the sinner and became a transcended one? She who rose beyond the fate bestowed upon her. With the sinner, she broke through the god's first intention for her and became something greater. Number 4. Is it possible that the traveler's own motivations connected them to Devat? The next possibility is more focused on Lumine as a person rather than any external force. What if the reason she stopped becoming a descender is because her own internal motivation became so intertwined with Conrad that she was tethered to this world? Consider it like this. Lumine would have started off as a descender because of her blank motivation to simply pass through Devat, similar to Aether in the current state. Aether has been a relatively courteous individual who helps out every now and then, but his overall mission isn't necessarily to stay in Devat or completely help them in the long run. His mission is just to find the truth of this world and find his sister to maybe continue world hopping. So what if because of Lumine's ambitions to restore Conria, that willpower to rival the entire world is no longer present because she's become attached? Almost like a reverse enlightenment where you become tethered by emotions or grief and compassion. I honestly thought that this would be a bit of a basic explanation, but really, ambition is the foundation of power in Genshin's lore. Honestly, Dainsleif could also be an unreliable narrator. Dainsleif frames it in a way that she is trapped, but maybe Lumine's decision is her own. That is strangely unlikely, but it would make for a much better narrative because it would keep her love and care for the Conrians genuine, instead of being manipulated by a mysterious force. But nevertheless, all in all, those are just possibilities. I don't think it's correct to say though that Lumine was never a descender, just that she isn't one at the moment. Scaramouche's description of her summoning coming from the heavens and Carabear's reverence of her as something otherworldly still confirms that Lumine's origins up until this point are true, that she and Aether did come from another world and they were genuinely brother and sister, just that something happened to her along the way. Now this could also imply that the Traveler himself could stop being a descender. It's completely possible for Aether's goal to personally adjust to the quote-unquote fate of Devat. Anyway, that's it for me today. As exhaustive as this could possibly be, I barely scratched the surface of anything that's happening here. This question has so many broken ends that I can't explain. One is that if Lumine became intertwined in Devat's fate after a certain point, why is the order of her records in the Irminsul backwards? Shouldn't it be that it starts from the moment that she is no longer a descender rather than obscuring the moment she had her fate-changing moment? Another one is, would her current stance really be contradictory to Rene's description of a descender? Lumine never lost her motivation or willpower, and she's not necessarily complying with the rules of Devat. The criteria that Rene gave is really vague. I honestly think we just have so little pieces of the puzzle. I think this is more divine than anything. There could also be a lot more characters at play, or even Dainsleif being a bigger influence to this matter than I first thought. I'm just interested to see what Genshin has cooking. Anyway, my name is Aster, thank you for chilling with me. And before I end this off, remember to download Comet Quest with the link below. Bye bye!